Okay, hello and welcome back to Crossroads of Cognizance, the one stop shop where we talk about all things metaphysical, woo woo. We share, we are two professional healers and energy workers and conjure workers, and we share our expertise on here so that you all will benefit. And we do all of this through a community discussion. I was going to say a curated community discussion. That sounds really
That's
special.
fair. That's very fair.
And as we go through our process, we hope that you enjoy what you're watching and we shift and expand your experience with us. So, before we get too deep in the weeds, we have a magical topic, energy topic today, and that is the use, or rather, magical and energetic tool keeping, storage, and cleansing. This topic it should be an interesting one in that there's going to be a lot of overlap as far as I think what Katrina and I do. And then there's this piece of like nuance that comes through when you're working with things over a period of time. Your tools kind of start to talk to you. So we'll see how this goes and where the discussion leads. But even before that, there's so many firsts. We should do some introductions. So if this is your first time joining us, after you hit that like and subscribe button, you'll need to know who I am. I am Dahlia Rose. I am the founder. Boy, Mercury is Mercurying today. The founder of the Conduit School. I serve my community as a healer, teacher, and a conduit for high vibrational energies. I teach my students and my clients to work with energy, move through meditation, work with crystals. I offer services like readings, counseling, and spiritual development. And I pull a bunch of like pretty much everything that I do. I mean, now my sessions used to be maybe an hour, and now they're 2 hours because I literally pull together everything that I do to support people who find my services and decide to work with me. And also, I offer these things to my students because it feels important that we take time to reconnect with our bodies and to feel empowered by ourselves, by life, by what we came here to do. And I'm only half of this broadcast. So,
Hi, I'm Katrina Rathfold. I do readings and cleansings and consultations and spell work for people via remote website, crossroadsoccult.com. I've written some books. That's me.
okay. And I think I don't know if I'm having the technical difficulties or if it's on both sides, but we'll keep the show rolling, see how it flows. So magic and energetic tools. It feels worth, it feels worth it to define what those are. So, I tend to, I mean, just like you would use tools around your house or tools in other areas of your life, if you have a job where that's a thing that you do, so it could be working on cars, it could be, I mean, even teachers in their classrooms have tools. Tools, whether they are magic, whether they are energetic, and I think there's overlap there. So the usage of the word is probably a personal endeavor, but magical tools, energetic tools, these are extensions of who you are, designed to enhance, supplement, uh, be a surrogate for various energies that you may be working with during a session, during ceremony, during ritual. And I find that the deeper you go on this journey, the more tools you end up having, and it can get pretty wild. I myself, I don't even know how many crystals I have at this point, but I would classify them under the tool definition. Do you have, outside of that, Katrina? Do you have thoughts about what tools or how you define tools?
Um, I think a tool. from the energetic platform and the spell work platform, magical platform. A tool is anything that accentuates your energy in some way. Now, that can be even a painting that uplifts your spirit and makes you feel more magical and more in tune with what you're doing. A tool can be a sacred name that you take on when you go into your work environment. A tool can be clothes that you wear, anything that approaches your senses, what you see, what you taste, what you feel, what you smell, and what you hear. So music can also be a tool, as well as we just lost Dahlia, as well as the accoutrements of the little things that you pick up along the way as tools. So anything really that is building your energy in some way and is providing another, and she's gone, another level. I hope I'm still there. Somebody send me a note and make sure that we're still rolling here without Dahlia. Drop a comment and let me know. But I'm just going to start talking, keep talking. So it is anything that puts another layer of power onto what you're doing. Thank you, Stephanie. So it can be things like candles, or it can be crystals, or it can be herbs, or it can be sound, drumming. It can be anything that is building on the energy of what you're doing. Now, when we think about tools, we're usually thinking about specific items like the pendulum, like the stones. But again, it can be air, which is basically, music is a sound wave. It can be a scent that's carried. So it's not just the toys, it's the other things that accentuate the environment as well. So that's my thought on what actually defines um, a magical tool. Be sure and jump into this conversation, everybody, and let us know what you think of as a magical tool while we're waiting for Dahlia to come back. And here she comes, we hope. Let's see. And there she is. So what I was just saying, Dahlia, was that to me, a magical tool is something that we layer onto our own presence and our own energy to accentuate the power of what we're doing. So it can be music, it can be a scent, it can be um, a visual cue, but it can also be the toys and the little tools that we pick up along the way. So it's basically anything additional to yourself that is causing an energy boost for you. Does that sound right to you?
Oh yeah, 100%. A much absolutely. And this, I love your definition because it opens up the floor for talking about jewelry, talking about even stones that you might
Apparently,
just
Mercury
pick up
retrograde is just
because
kicking our complete asses today.
I don't know, am I dropping in and out?
You did, and then we both went away for me. So I don't know what the user end is looking like with Bram and Stephanie, but I've lost you twice that I can see so far. One time all the way out and back in again. And then both of my images started spinning just a second ago. So I don't even know.
Well, what I was saying was that I loved your definition because it opened up opportunities to talk about jewelry, to talk about even like when you're walking outside and something glitters on the sidewalk and you happen to notice it, that can become part of your arsenal, part of your toolkit. And one of the things that I love about magical and energetic tools is that, on days when you are not feeling at your best, sometimes these guys can be a great surrogate for energy as well. And primarily, if you're not feeling your best, you probably don't want to work on other people. In ritual and personal ritual and ceremony, these become maybe a stand-in for energy that you had, or um, it really depends on the tools that we're talking about. But there's so many different aspects to working with tools, of course.
Absolutely. One thing I want to get into very briefly that I think is important is there are a lot of mythologies around your magical tools. And it's really interesting
Hmm.
how hard people work to complicate and overcomplicate the relationship that you have with your magical tools. And it can really make it difficult to know what is real and what isn't in this respect. So I have four that I wanted to touch on just real quick that I would like to dispel right away to a certain degree. There's and I know you've run into this, Dahlia. There is a mythology out there, and I cannot imagine what fucking Scrooge McDuck started this mess, but it says that you should never buy your own tools. They should always be gifted to you. If you should not ever buy your
Oh,
first tarot deck because it should always be given to you, and this means that you're being, called. And that is so ridiculous. Number one, I would never let some incompetent person choose my tarot deck, because even if they can look at a tarot deck and tell she would really like this, she likes fairies, and this is a Brian Fraud deck or whatever it might be, there's no knowing if that deck is going to speak to me. It's almost impossible to choose your own tools. You don't know what ritual knife is going to draw you. You don't. Nobody else can know what stones are calling you. You have to choose your tools. And sometimes, as Dahlia was pointing out, your tools will choose you. We're all energy workers are magpies, and we find the shiny things and the little heart-shaped stones and things like that that jump out at us along the way. And so sometimes the tool will call us. Sometimes you're in a thrift store and you just happen to see the exact thing you've been looking for. And you wonder, why is a cauldron with a pentacle in this Christian thrift store? And you're like, swipe, I'll
for a
have this.
dollar.
Yeah, for $1, or they're going to pay me to take it. So sometimes your tools will go to enormous lengths to find you. And sometimes
Yeah.
you go to enormous lengths to find them, and that adds value to them as well. There's paintings by an artist called David Delamere, and they are pagan processions that are winter, spring, summer, and fall. Mine burned, and I've been looking for these things ever since. I love these paintings, and I will move heaven and earth to find these paintings somehow, some way. And so sometimes there's something that's so dear to you that you'll go out of your way to find it, which adds value. Sometimes, as I said, it goes out of its way to find you, which adds value. So, and some people just find something, swipe, this isn't mine, but somebody else is going to need it. And then somebody comes along, admires it, and you're like, here, take it. I wondered whose it was. So I'm not saying that magical tools should never be gifted. I'm saying you're getting into a really tight box when you say they have to be. The next thing is
Right.
to not let other people touch your tools. Now, it is a rule that you should never touch another person's magical tools without their permission, without asking, oh, that's beautiful. Can I hold it? But and don't be offended if they say no. That has nothing to do with your value as a person or a practitioner. It's got to do with the connection and relationship they have with that tool. But you should never feel like you can't let somebody hold your tool. Heck, there's times that I had a really special necklace or tool that I just passed all the way around my coven so everybody could hold it and bless it and be connected with it. So I felt like those people were with me. There's times that one of your tools is your mother's ring that you got from her estate and it's dear to you, or she touched it a lot of times and no telling who else did. So you have to be sure that you're monitoring who touches your items if you feel precious about that. There's some of my stuff that I just, I'll pass a tarot deck to somebody and just say, hey, just go at it. You can look at that. I don't care. And there's some of my items that are really personal that I just don't want anybody just monkeying with. You decide. But don't let society decide that you can't do that. Don't let society decide you can do any of this. The other thing is there's a sort of a myth that you should never buy used items or used tools because they're going to have energy with them. Well, honey, you ain't no kind of practitioner if you can't clean that stuff out. So, and that's part of what we're going to teach you today. But
Right.
my best item, I would say probably 95% of all magical items I've ever owned in my entire life were used. I find the best stuff at thrift stores and yard sales and estate sales, and that people will just bring a whole box of stuff and says, I hear you like weird stuff here, and just hand it to me and you clean it out. And it's not a big deal. You don't have to be afraid of that. And the last thing is what really pisses me off, and this is these arrogant people who say, I don't need tools. I don't need tools. I walk the earth like Cain. I can cast a circle in my head. I am so magical that all these tools just weigh me down and hold me back. I'm like, yeah, whatever, poser. That is not true. Everybody has something that builds up their energy and makes them feel valuable or makes them feel more powerful or more themselves. You just layer that stuff on there, magpies. You just enjoy what the world sends to you in terms of gifts if you don't want to go looking for it. And always people say they don't need tools. They're just saying that because they don't have any cool ones. So don't worry about it. I'm done.
You know,
So that's my mythology.
on the last piece with the tools, I mean, even down to your clothing can be a tool. I mean, for the longest time, all I wore was white. I mix it up a little bit now. We throw in a little splash of color every now and then, but um, that was a tool. The fabric that I chose was a tool. That wearing the same outfit every time, that was a tool. So yeah, I'd have to agree with Katrina on this one.
Mm-hmm.
If you're unless you're doing your sessions stark naked
Yeah.
outside, and even if you're outside, maybe the wind is part of your toolkit. Who knows? But everybody's using
And
something, and everybody's working with something.
anytime you're laying a presumption onto the tool process and saying you shouldn't or you must always, or trying to tailor somebody else's use of tools into what you do, you just lost the game. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
It's about what works for each person that harms none. That is just part of um, their toolbox, and it might not be the same as yours. I don't need to have my tools be the same as the next person in order for mine to have validity. Not everybody's going to have,
Right.
you know, 18 eggs in their repository toolbox like I do. And that's fine. Everybody has to find
I've
what
only
works
got
for them.
six
And it
in my.
really irritates me when people get arrogant about what their tools are, or worse, let's go the other direction. And, oh, this Athame cost me $800, and therefore it is the most powerful Athame anyone could ever possibly have. Just my first Athame was a thrift store knife that that I put a leather uh, casing around the handle. I mean, it worked fine.
Right, right. I think mine was selenite, and I was just obsessed with the crystal. It wasn't even about it being a dagger.
Hmm.
So yeah, fully agreed on that. Now, when it comes to keeping these sort of things, I feel like we have to kind of dive into specifics because each magical tool is kept differently. If your tool is meant to, let's say you have an extraction tool, or it is a tool like, well, you said Athame, right? Those
Hmm.
I've heard, and maybe you can dispel this rumor. I've heard, I don't keep mine this way, but I've heard that they like to be stood up in their stands. So is
Oh, I
that,
never had an Athame with a stand.
see?
My, mine are just knives. Now, one thing that is true about the Athame specifically, it is supposed to be. Now, this is where I differ. I got to tell y'all, it's supposed to be a dull knife. It's not supposed to have an edge because it's supposed to
Mm,
be purely ceremonial. And I got to tell you, mine is sharpened to a fare thee well, and that's because I use it for everything. I use it to cut cords. I use it to dig out candle wax from something. And I remember one time, I think it was Eric actually. I'm not 100% sure because it was a really long time ago that I was down. I mean, I was getting down on this candle holder because there was wax deep in there, and I'm digging and digging and digging with my really fancy Athame. And he comes in and he says, "Well, can't you find a better tool for that?" And I just looked at it. I was like, I don't think there is a better tool for it. And I just went on digging and digging. And so, really, I keep mine sharp because I'm going to use it for sharp stuff all the time. I'll use it to scrape wax off of a table that I just ruined with somebody's candle and all kinds of stuff. So, I understand the wisdom behind this, the dull Dathami and the symbolism of it. But for me, my type of witches were all about practicality. And
Hmm.
they didn't probably have multiple knives. They had a knife. It might have been, strapped to their leg or something, or kept on their belt so that they could use it. And probably is in a piece holder or something like that. But they're not going to have 4 or 5 different knives, and one of them has no functionality other than casting circles, which the other one can do just fine. So I do a lot of practical usage stuff.
Okay. And the keeping of it just means, keeping it somewhere where it's available as opposed
Yeah.
to special holders and things like that. Although
Hmm.
this doesn't decrease the sacredness of it to you.
So the Athame specifically is a Wiccan tool. That's really
Mm.
the only place we hear about the Athame is in Wicca. And that's where we get, and because the harms none credo is there, that's where we get the dulled edge. And I have a feeling, Dahlia, that the standing straight down in the stand, that's a grounded sword. That's a grounded blade, so it's not dangerous to anybody. So I think it might be
I,
indicating a blade at rest that is not of harm to anyone. And so there's also in Wicca a bowline, which is a curved knife that is specific. It's white handled, usually white bone, that's used specifically for cutting herbs.
mm,
So Wicca has um, its own dictates and its own flows, and so definitely go by what, if you're working within that platform, and you're not just going by what feels right to you, go by what you're being taught, because you might be taught something very specific about how your tools should be managed. And so that's, but I don't know any pagans at all that don't have knives just everywhere. We're just all about knives.
fair, fair. And thank you for venturing into that Wicca discussion, because I
Mhm.
know what you have great knowledge there, but also that's not your necessarily your practice. So thank you for that.
It's not my bag anymore, but it was a really great run, and I loved it, and I have great respect for it. I really do. One thing we should talk about when we're talking about the acquisition of tools is the dispersal of tools. And yes, I do want to step back onto the storage of those. Most of the time, I've found the tool will tell you how it wants to be managed. If you
Hmm.
meditate with, work with it, it'll tell you what it wants. That's especially true with tarot decks, and different tarot decks want different things. Some
Oh,
want a
for
fancy
sure.
little glass case and like they're the Sleeping Beauty, and some want a simple wood pine box like they're dead. Some want to be wrapped in a silk scarf, please, facing west under your pillow or whatever. They just have different things they want. But one thing that's also really important, and I have trouble with this. I don't know if you do, Dahlia, or not. And we've been friends a real long time, and I do not know this about you. I have trouble knowing when to get rid of my items, especially if it's dear to
Oh.
me. And sometimes you just have an item that comes to you for a reason or a season and not a lifetime. And so you've gotten good use out of it, you've enjoyed it, and it's just telling you, I need to go be with that person, or I need, and so you hand it to them, you kind of hold on a little bit too long. But, sometimes tools are just meant to be with you for a little while, and then you are supposed to release them to somebody else. Now, something that we do in our group is we have a llama, specifically a first harvest, August 1st purge. And that's where we put out these big, long white tables, and people bring their magical tools that they're releasing and their items that they're releasing. And part of the ritual is that you go into those fields of those tables and you harvest the things you can use
Mm.
from what was brought. So you're making room for the harvest by giving up some things that you have used before that aren't calling you anymore. And then you get your harvest by taking in some of the things that have come. And that's one good way to get rid of the stuff, is just to rehome it that way. I don't really recommend with your magical tools just chuck them into the Goodwill, but usually you can find some way to rehome them to someone who understands the importance of them.
I won't even just chuck my used candle jars away. Like there's a whole there's a whole process to releasing things. I will say I have no preconceived notions about how I will dispose of anything. Like obtaining it, I just assume it's forever. And then if somebody walks in, if the situation is right. Like I'm finding actually, was commenting to my membership group that I feel like I'm going through a phase now of tool purging where
Mm-hmm.
I just, you might notice I'm in an office and not in my house. I'm in my new office. Clearly the Wi-Fi is a challenge. But bringing things in here, it's very clear which things want to be here and which ones don't. Not based on the positive or the negative of the energy, but just how they would like to be of service, or do they fit in the space. And so it is an interesting journey as far as how the tools talk to you and how they want to be kept here. I have some tools that wish to remain in like bags and things unless they are in actual use, and then I have others that prefer to be hit by natural light or just out and about. Especially like my wands and things. My wands really like being out and exposed and to be hit by light, but they also like to, or at least I will say it feels better in the room when they're all facing inward, like the center of the room.
Mm-hmm.
But this is all based on feeling and connection with those tools for sure.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I have some rocks, some stones that work better for me if they're wet.
Mm.
And it's not like malachite works better for me if it's wet, or jasper works better for me if it's wet. It's like this jasper does and this jasper doesn't. It's like the
Mm.
individual rock likes to be wet so that the colors are more vibrant and jumping out a little bit better. And it really is just about just holding that tool in your hand, feeling it, and trying different things that you're led to do. Like you were mentioning with the light, that's a huge thing. Is it catching the moonlight? Is it catching the
Mm.
sunlight? What time of day? Is it morning or afternoon sun? That affects the energy of the tool a little bit and can affect the energy when you use it actually in application. You were mentioning the wands. Our wands in our shop like to be tipped down. And so what we would do is I had this great big black cast iron pot hanger oval thing. And we had it up over one of the tables, and we just used fishing line and just dangled all the wands straight down from there because that's how they wanted to be. And you could run your hand over the table under where all those wands are pointing. It's just like whoom, whoom,
Oh,
whoom.
that's so cool.
And like you, we had specific items that wanted to be personal items at home and specific items that wanted to be in use at the shop. We had some items that wanted to be decorative at the shop. And
Mm.
so we had not expected to do that because we hate going to a shop and everything's not for sale. It
Right.
feels restrictive, like, oh, I can't have that. You know, I want that. Name your price, you know. But no, some things are just not for sale. So I ended up putting little stickers and cards on some items that say, I'm not for sale, I live here. And
That's cute.
so that there was more of a sense of this is family, this is part of the architecture rather than you just can't have this. But yeah, some things wanted to be there and just show off and just be decorative. So we just always tried to tune into how things want to be. You're like me, a really you have a strong affinity for feng shui and the flow of a shop. It's probably our Virgo-ish stuff. And so I like I can tell immediately when the energy's choppy because something is where it's not supposed to be. And Debbie, who was the shop designer, she just had it down. She knew exactly how things should flow, and she was really good at it. And so if I was sometimes I could just feel that something was off and I didn't know what it was. And Debbie
Mm.
would come, twitching into the shop and she's just like, oh, it's that bing bing. And she would move it and all of a sudden everything's fine. So
Everything went well.
I'm really into the feel of, and that also affects your tools. You got to feel good about where they are. And I want to tell y'all, if you're in a house that's full of clutter and you got your magical tools just messed in with all that clutter, you the devil. Okay, you got the devil in you, girl. You need to you need to step up your game because that's not going to work. You need to keep your tools. When we're talking about how to keep the tools, they need to be safe. They need to be drama and crisis free. And trust me, clutter is chaos, and that
Yeah.
creates drama, and you don't want that around your tools. So if you can't manage any other part of your house, you manage your little dresser top or sideboard or whatever is your altar space. It can be a little bit of chaos in there, but it needs to be magical chaos and not incidental chaos because you mixed it in with your McCall's magazines and your, cat box or something. So
Oh
make sure
God.
that make sure that you got your tools where they want to be, because I guarantee you they don't want to be in the middle of your butterick patterns that you inherited from your mother. So,
Yeah, this goes to when I'm talking to people about how to store their crystals and things like that and where to put them. A lot of people start out with some sort of altar or something for their crystals, and then they just start piling other things on there. And I'm like, then
yeah.
it's not an altar anymore. Like now you've just sort of mixed in hodgepodge this, and it's not sacred. I mean, it may be a very concentrated dose of energy, but even as you don't care what you put up there, what kind of energy is being generated?
Yeah. Don't you
Yeah.
hate it when somebody comes in and like sets their Pepsi can on your altar? You're like, have you lost your ever loving mind?
I
Just like,
wish they would. That would.
you know, your eyes are like saucers just bugging out of your head. You're trying to restrain this fight or flight like you're going to kill somebody. It's,
It's
yep.
incredible. Um, so as far as keeping them and like storing them, Katrina mentioned boxes for the tarot cards. I don't find keeping any sort of crystal or stone in boxes helpful. They don't seem to like it. I even struggle putting them in plastic to send them home, because plastic is a little chaotic. I mean, I'm extra. Let's just let that be the caveat is that Dahlia is extra. So,
You know what we did, Dahlia,
wrap
is we did the organza bags because they could
ah,
breathe.
yeah,
That worked
yeah.
out
So,
real well. They were real happy. Even though organza is not a natural fabric, they still were pretty and they could breathe and they seemed to play well in those.
okay, so see, I'm not wasn't entirely crazy in my boat,
So
but
extra. We are so
it
extra.
invariably there would be times when I had to do bubble wrap, and I'd be like, "I'm sorry, get it out of here as quickly
Aw,
as possible."
these are our little bags.
Yeah, yep, we had hundreds
People
of
that
those.
shop with us often and bring back 10 or 12, like, here, I know you can reuse these.
Right, as they
Yeah,
buy more, just put them in here, like your own
yep,
reusable shopping bag. Um,
you bet.
any tools made of wood, I tried to keep in. I tried to keep them out of like, how do I say this? High traffic energy areas. Anything made out
Mhm.
of wood or bone or skin, I would just like try to keep them away from high traffic energy areas, just because they're to me those tools are still alive.
Mhm.
So it's not that they
Yep.
can't be cleansed, it is that they are they're more, I think they're more porous, I guess is the word that I want to
Yeah, I
use.
agree. You also want to
So
keep them out of direct sunlight. So
oh yeah.
if you have them on an altar that gets full afternoon sun for 5 or 6 hours, from a practical level, that will age that product a lot faster. So, and obviously you got candles, you don't want them in superheat. You really got to be mindful of what is the material that makes up this item. That's a really awesome point, Delia.
Right. And I was just, you reminded me with the sunlight piece, people in their crystals and, all over the internet, charge your crystals in the sunlight. And I'm like, well, yes and no. Quartz, amethyst, rose quartz, and citrine, and a few agates are all really susceptible to sunlight. So, if you are putting your crystals out there every single day because you're worried about charging them or clearing them, you will have faded stones eventually as well. So, it's worth considering that as well when you can um, cleanse, charge, what have you, your crystals in moonlight, which is just sunlight that's coming through the moon. So it's equally as amazing,
Right?
equally as powerful. What else? What other tools are there? I don't have much.
In the world. One thing about tarot cards, there are a ridiculous number of tarot cards that only feel comfortable in their homeostatic box, whatever
Oh,
box they came in. They don't like to be stored outside of that.
yep.
And
See,
I would say probably 70, 75%. So, there's a few decks that just want to shed that box as soon as you get them home, but most of them like to be in that box. That's why behind me, that's my tarot shelf back there. A lot of those decks have boxes that are 30, 40 years old and are just falling apart. I mean, it's sad, and I got paper around them and stuff, just trying to hold on to the integrity of that box because the deck is so insistent on having that particular box. When we were talking about tools and being done with them, tarot also is one of the first tools that will absolutely kind of bitch slap you if you keep it too long and it's not meant to
hmm,
be with you anymore. So you've been getting really good readings from your Morgan Greer deck for a while, and all of a sudden it just was like new phone, who dat? It just isn't talking to you or anything, and you're like, what's wrong? I thought we were buddies here, and it just wants to go on and move on to be with somebody else. And admittedly, the fire helped me a lot with being able to release things, but I have always
mm,
been, in my heart, I'm a hoarder, but I was a military wife for 22 years, and you just can't do that as a military wife because you're going to
you
be
cannot.
moving all the time. And poor Eric would just go build another shed, to keep my acquisitions in. Um, he really made me laugh one time because he was building one, and they have a dictate in our county that there's a square footage that you do not have to get a permit for, and that square footage is the base. So he said, well, they tell me how big it can be, they don't tell me how tall it can be. So he just made it really, really tall. so yeah, so I tend to hold on to things too long, and I've had to really get good with really getting in tune with that item and say, do you want to be here? Are you happy being here? Is it time for
Mm,
me to let you go? And I'm better at it now than I used to be. I used to be terrible at it. My daughter has a real struggle with hoarding, and I really think it's a type of on the spectrum behavior that she and I both have, that I'm just 62. I think I've gotten more in tune with, out of necessity, not doing that. But
right.
if I were to just really cut loose, I could do that, especially with magical tools. The thing is, you would think that having a whole bunch of magical tools would make them less valuable, and it just doesn't. It
It
doesn't.
doesn't.
It
There's so
doesn't.
just as you were saying with the crystals and their individual personalities, one may like to be wet, the others may not.
Mhm.
Um, all the tools are individual. I'm sitting next to two llamas that I call the trauma llamas. I have three of them, and they all have their own personality, and people are drawn to them for different reasons to help them calm down and petting them and stuff like that. But why do I have them? I mean, at first they made me squeal. That's why they existed, and then they became magical
Yeah.
tools. They're
It's
fur
like
at
saying your
least.
kids aren't going to be loved as much because you got six of them instead of two. No, you're going to love all those babies.
Right, individually, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Candles. This is a good one because so you're a candle manufacturer.
Yep.
I am just a candle keeper, so I tend to have a
Mhm.
lot of them and use them for different reasons. But I will store them. I will also try to keep them away from high energy areas just because they're so absorbent, and they need to
Oh,
be.
yes.
I've seen in your videos, because if you guys don't know, Katrina has her own YouTube channel, which is amazing. Um, you've talked about having to clear them first. So, what
Mhm.
does candle storage look like for you?
So, candles and soap are the primary mediums that super absorb energy. And that's why they're so desirable for spell work, because you can just push. It's like the difference in shoving, I don't know, something, nails, into a concrete brick versus shoving it into an apple. I mean, it
Mm,
just really just goes right in there. So that's why I'm a fan of candle work. When I'm purchasing candles to reuse, um, I have specific vendors that I like because I like the quality of what they do. And then we store it in our apothecary in great big rows of different colors of candles. And so the storage before it is fixed is real willy-nilly. They might be in cases or they might just be along the counter where Eric's working on them or wherever. We're not real particular because at that point it's not a magical item yet. It's a tool that we're going to use to make a magical item. So I could just as easily go in and grab one of those candles if there's a power outage for light and not be afraid that I'm going to, you know, get a job that I don't want or something. Draw love to my life. It's just a candle at that point.
right.
And so when we're fixing it to either burn here for a client with setting of the lights or to send out to a client, if it's being sent out to a client, that's going to happen in one smooth motion. Eric is going to fix the candle. He's going to poke the insides and put the oil in and put the herb on and put the glitter on and seal it and empower it. Then it's going to be immediately rolled in the bubble wrap and put into the box. So when the client opens it, this candle has not been sitting out, collecting anybody's energy. It is completely sealed and blessed and ready for them to just open and do their thing. If I'm going to burn the candle here, as soon as he makes that candle, he's going to bring it to me and it's going on my altar. I might not
Wow.
light it right away because I might be waiting for a specific time to do
Right.
that, but it's always going to go directly onto a sacred space as soon as that candle is ready. So that's our care and handling. While the candle is burning, it's always going to burn in a sacred space. Now, because I'm fire scary, I don't I don't just leave my candles burning out of my altar because I like to burn mine straight through. I don't interrupt the burn of the candle at all. So I have containers that I put them in for nighttime so that they're safe. But that's how I do my candles. Now, one thing of interest, like I said, hoarder tendencies. Also, as being the age that I am, there's been a lot of really wonderful things I've purchased that I can never get again. They just disappear, like those David Delamere prints that I want. Um, and that makes me really sensitive when I find something I really love because if I let it go, will I ever be able to see it ever again? Can I replace it if I need it? And candles are one of the things where I get tripped up or used to. I don't anymore because I just don't buy them. But do you remember when for a while we had all the beautiful shaped candles that not just figure candles, but they had like filigrees and were really elaborate and you burn them down. Sometimes it's a pyramid and it's got little prizes inside like amulets and stones and
Oh
things
yeah.
like that. They're really, so I never wanted to burn them because they were so pretty. And I was afraid I'd never get them again. And so I had all of these furry candles sitting around, that are high quality wax that I can't be bothered to burn because I might not be able to get it
It's
again.
too pretty.
I've learned, just burn because guess what? The candle's ultimately burned. But I
Oh,
would irony at its finest. But now I think if I got a fancy candle from somebody, I'd burn it. I'd burn it. But that's how I manage my candles because I like to
mm,
keep once the candle is made sacred, I want it to stay in a sacred environment. That's the short
that
answer.
makes sense. That makes absolute sense. Yeah. Um, I'm
So
like looking around my.
one of the
To
things we
see
were
what other.
talking about is how to clean these things.
Oh
And
yes.
so any tools that you have can absolutely get overwhelmed with energy so that it can't take any more energy into it, which okay, well you can discharge that energy by using it, but sometimes it's not something you're using all the time. And sometimes, for instance, with my tools, if I'm using it for a cleansing on somebody, I want to be able to have that tool help that person to the utmost, which means that tool is open to what's happening with that person. And people don't come to me on their best day. They don't come to me when they're happy to be alive and God is on his throne and the heavens are shining. They come when they're really upset about something and something's going wrong. So a lot of that energy goes into the tools I use for healing. If I hand somebody a grounding stone, I need to know that the next person I hand that stone to isn't going to feel worse because they're picking up on what the other person had. So Dahlia and I use a lot of different techniques for grounding our items. And again, it that comes not only to a knowledge of the item and how it works in the world as a scientific process, but also it comes to a relationship with the item. For instance, selenite is a fantastic tool for draining and recharging your magical tools. So I'll have a great big selenite altar that I'll put my stuff on and just let it pull out the bad stuff, push in the good stuff. But now Eric Wolf will fight with me about this. Selenite often does not like to be in water. Now he says it doesn't matter, that a rock is a rock. He's a geologist, that knows more than I do. My selenite has just been like a cat to put in the water. It just does not like it. And black items, black stones are really good for drawing energy down. That's why most of our grounding stones are black, because black pulls. That's what black does. White radiates, black pulls in. So know your science, and that will tell you a lot about how your magical tools are going to operate and how and what to use to cleanse them. And then I want Dahlia to talk, but then I got some ideas, and you have ones to add on to it about the smokes and the items, the washes we can use too.
So for my tools, I like to use it. It depends. Just as Katrina was saying, I like to use Florida water. I've taken start making my own, and so I will use that to cleanse my tools or cleanse the space. I also love, and this I learned from Katrina, four thieves vinegar.
Oh yeah.
So um, I will use that to wipe down surfaces or my tools, especially just to. I mean, I found it to be just like a really kick ass kind of get rid of everything, absolutely everything you can tool for cleansing my things. I've used selenite. I do like it for crystal cleansing and cleansing metal in particular. So I'll put my jewelry on selenite, especially if it's a jewelry item I'm wearing for sessions or things like that. But I also use my altar. I will ask my ancestors and my guides to cleanse an item if especially if it's a personal item, because I ask them to charge it as well. So, and it feels important to say when you go to, at least this is my philosophy, when you go to cleanse something, you can also ask to have it charged, because whatever is less than that frequency or that vibration of positive energy, that it'll just fall off, or change, as it were. So, those are the primary ways that I use cleansing, but there is always smoke.
Smoke. So some other of the traditional ways to cleanse your tools, one is to bury it, and you can put it in a Ziploc bag and bury it even in your backyard or wherever. Just, you don't have to go 6 feet under, just get the dirt over it. Let it rest there for at least, I would say, a 3-day cycle. I like to do, if I have something I'm going to bury, that means it really needed help. It was just really overwhelmed and needed not just to be charged, but to be recharged. It needed to go to complete zero and back again. And so what I'll do for that is I bury it on the full moon and let it sit through to the new moon. And then I'll dig it up then, because that's a full 2 weeks of just purging and purging and purging as the moon is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You can also put it out in the full moon light, and that is one of the charging techniques that where Dahlia was talking about charging it. And some people, might be less popular now, but when I was a baby witch, one of the big things was white lighting something. And that's where you're just pushing so much divine white light into an item that it does exactly what Dahlia said. It's not that you're cleansing it in terms of scrub, scrub, scrub. You're pushing out everything that is not that light. And that can help just build it. Now, one thing to remember is nature abhors a vacuum. So if you are just cleansing and leaving it empty, you should probably put something in there to hold that space so that it
Right.
doesn't attract anything else. And often that's just your healing energy or positive energy or divine energy, divine light. Purple light is really good for that. But yeah, putting something out in the moonlight and just letting the moonlight build it can be really a nice way to do it too. And this is really good for water. This is how you charge water, by putting it out in the different phases of the moon. So those are a couple of the traditional ways to cleanse out your tools. But yes, smokes, smokes. You mentioned the washes because you mentioned Four Thieves. That traditionally is a disinfectant. So like you said, it just gets rid. It shakes that etch a sketch, boy. It just it's clean and empty. Chinese wash is nice. It works the same way as the moon does, in that it puts so much positivity into something that it pushes out anything negative.
And it
It if
smells
you wash
fantastic.
with,
Oh my God.
yeah, if you wash with Chinese wash, it's not like it's going to make friends with any of the boogabears that are in there.
Book of
It's
Bears.
they're not going to get along. It's just going to push everything. Stop it. It's just going to push everything. So you can use Chinese wash, you can use Four Thieves. I like to do both. What I will do is I will use Chinese wash and then I'll go, or excuse me, Four Thieves wash, and then I'll go back over it with the Chinese. And that way,
Yes.
what one misses, the other one catches. You're also doing the handshake of purging it down, getting rid of everything, disinfecting, and using the Chinese wash to bring it back up again. So I've got my smokes. We smoke differently, you and I, and um, so so
We
you go
do.
ahead because you got your favorite, and it is not my favorite, but I got
It's
lots of
like,
it and I use lots of it.
okay. And so my favorite is juniper. Um, I do not actually have a lot of it right now. It's quite disappointing, but we will change that.
I know
Uh,
what I'm sending you for your late birthday present.
but yes, juniper is my one-two punch for cleansing as far as smokes go. Katrina swayed me back into sage land when I took bio universal healing with her, and she was like, you read the smoke. I Juniper for me doesn't really like to be red because it's not a
No, it
combustible.
doesn't. It doesn't
But
billow
sage,
like, yeah.
yeah, yeah, but sage all day would just, hey, I've got a story to tell, and so,
It's
but
kind of
my
narcissistic.
preference
It
is
loves to
juniper if I can
grandstand.
get
Yeah. Yeah.
it. Sage is narcissistic.
It
Fair,
is.
fair. It is the global favorite. But
It
yes,
is. And I do use juniper. To me, it juniper has, because I do a lot of blends, and juniper will overpower any other herb that I put together with it. It's just a boss. And so I use it for some things. We have to be very careful around the idea of using the white sage because of the cultural appropriation concerns. We need to make very careful certainty of where we're getting it from, that it was harvested in a sustainable way, and that it was processed in a sacred way. I've got my one person that I do that manages all my sage, all the different kinds of sage. White sage, I was taught to use for the air around you. You can use it to cleanse things, but it's mostly for the atmosphere and the environment around you, the energies around you. So if I do a cleansing on somebody and this I'm doing the sage bath and it's billowing, I know they have contamination from outside sources. This isn't something inside them. It's outside. It's something they're being exposed to on a regular basis. Black sage, on the other hand, is my newfound love. It's another of the salvias. I
yeah,
love black sage because it works from the inside out rather than from the outside in. And so that's a real nice handshake to use. if you're having insecurities that are causing disruptions in your energetic fields, fears, um, you're unsure about your relationship, you feel like you're never going to get ahead in your job. I feel. If you're hearing that a lot from yourself or others, then it's time for the black sage. And it's a
Mm.
real sweet smelling sage, and it just cleans out all of the inside gunk. It's like Drano for your energetic pipes. It just gets rid of all of it. Shasta sage is a very specific sagebrush from Mount Shasta, and it is very combustible, and it has a really super sweet smell. Now, I prefer sagebrush of all of the types of sage. Sagebrush is my favorite smell, and it has a really gentle cleansing. I use Shasta sage for temple areas or sacred spaces to cleanse those out. And then the other thing that I would bring up is I've got like three more: mugwort. And I use mugwort both burning and using smoke, but I'll also make a mugwort tea if I'm going to wash down things like quartz or crystal balls or mirrors, because
Hmm.
it just neutralizes the energy that is picked up. If people bring a haunted mirror to me, I'll just give it a mugwort bath and it's all done. I've gotten the coolest mirrors in my life because people will bring me this old ancient haunted mirror. Oh, I can't stand to have this thing in my house anymore. And I look into it, I'm like, oh yeah, this mirror has some memories in there. But man, you just wash it down with mugwort and it just forgets everything. And it's a beautiful mirror. Oh, I don't want it back. I can't stand it. Well, gee,
Oh
do you
no.
mind if I screen this for you? Hang it on my wall.
Right.
Florida water's real good for
Oh
if
yeah.
as long as what you have is not susceptible to alcohol, because Florida water is made usually from vodka, and selenite does not play well with Florida water. You do not want to squirt down
No.
your selenite with anything that acidic and abrasive. And some of your softer stones will struggle with the Florida water, and though it'll get grainy feeling on the outside, especially if it's one that's been polished. You'll start to feel that it's not as smooth as it was. But Florida water, boy, I use that on everything.
Yep.
And Palo Santo is another one that I'll use if something feels like it's really been in the dirty. If I get an item in that's been donated and it's just feels like this thing's seen too much, I'll use the Palo Santo because it's more of a protectant. It cleans it, but also kind of makes sure that everything's safe.
One of my
So those
mentors
are
was big on using Palo Santo in exorcisms, just to,
oh yeah.
yeah.
My favorite's to use the Palo Santo chips.
Mm.
Now the sticks are good, but they don't stay lit for very long. So it's a wood. You gotta keep lighting it. But they have little Palo Santo chips that I just put on a charcoal and just go to town with it. That's really good for me for the cleansing parts. Or throw it into a fire that I've got my cauldron or something and just pass it over. Yep. So
So
that's what I do. I think that crosses everything off my list for everything I do.
I love
I'm
that you had
looking.
a list because
Well, I didn't
working
have a list till we started talking.
now,
Yeah.
as far as the discussion is concerned, so we talked about keeping them. It's the general rule of thumb when you're keeping magical or energetic items is to have a conversation with them. I mean, I will stay away from certain things like plastics or um, uh, containers that don't really protect the items I'm working with. But generally speaking, you
Mhm.
have conversation. You can get it a glass box, a wood box, make something out of leather, or just build a tall shed, or phone Eric about those dimensions. And then,
Well, and what you're talking about too there is natural items. They tend to like most tools enjoy being kept in a natural fabric or a
mm,
natural wood or bone, or glass isn't exactly natural, but it's made from natural products. So I think of it as natural.
and sometimes you
Sorry, I didn't
get
mean to.
crystal boxes too. Like I have an alabaster box that I use to keep some tiny crystals
Ooh,
in.
oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, I have
I
to
like
get you
that.
one.
I'll
um,
trade you for some juniper.
sounds fair. Sounds fair.
Yeah.
And then as far as um, cleansing them, there's a lot of different options as far as sprays, smokes, and light or energy work. And then, when you go to store them or, have them around, you may find yourself moving them periodically from time to time. One of the things that I meant to bring up was when I studied with this guru, he talked about using like actual energy tools. So not just tools that you imbue with energy, but he would talk about pulling knives or needles or whatever energetic tool you needed from the divine. And so you literally, like, you're reaching up in session. If anybody watches me do a session, they will probably see this action take place. And you pull down whatever it is that you need and you use it. And but these energetic tools were only good for one usage. So if you're doing some sort of suturing with like your aura or something like that, you go in, you do your suturing, and then if you have to repair something else, you give the tool back to the divine for cleansing,
Mhm.
or you drop it into what he called universal fire, and that will clean the tool off. I always thought that was interesting. I wanted to bring it up during the
That's
show.
wonderful.
Yeah, little weird, but as all of our show topics end, there's no right or wrong. So from this, we hope that you have gained some wisdom and insight on your own working with tools, perhaps a deeper relationship or an awareness you didn't have before. And we would love for you to continue to share those in the comments section. We'll see them later on. And if anything that we talked about today seems worth diving deeper on, we'd love to hear about that as well. But we are at that power hour where we are going to put this show back in the fridge for another week. We will see you next week. Thank you for joining in, and we'll catch you next time on Crossroads of Cognizance. Bye, everybody.